She was once the queen of daytime television, the woman who danced her way into America's living rooms every single afternoon, the host who made kindness her brand and generosity her calling card. Ellen DeGeneres wasn't just famous. She was beloved, a cultural icon who seemed untouchable, unshakable, immune to the darkness that swallows so many celebrities whole. But then something happened, something that shattered the illusion so completely, so brutally that even years later the wreckage is still smoldering. And here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The brutal rumor that's been whispered in Hollywood circles, repeated in industry meetings, and acknowledged with knowing glances at every entertainment conference. Ellen DeGeneres will never come back. Not really. Not in the way she once stood at the center of American culture, like a lighthouse in the storm. The question isn't whether she can return. It's whether anyone actually wants her to. Let me take you back. Way back, before the fall. Before the scandal. Before the brutal unraveling that shocked millions of fans who thought they knew her. Ellen grew up in Metairie, Louisiana, in a world that didn't make room for people like her. She was funny even then, quick-witted, sharp, the kind of kid who could make you laugh even when you were determined to stay mad. But beneath that humor was something else. A quiet understanding that she was different. That the world she was growing up in had very specific ideas about who you were supposed to be, who you were supposed to love, and what you were supposed to say about it. She started doing stand-up comedy in the early 80s. Small clubs, tiny stages, audiences who barely filled the room. But Ellen had something special. An observational style that felt fresh and honest. She talked about everyday life with this gentle absurdity that made people see their own experiences in a completely new light. And then came the phone call that changed everything. It was 1986. Johnny Carson's people wanted her on The Tonight Show. For a comedian, this wasn't just a booking. It was the booking. The one that separated the amateurs from the legends. Ellen walked onto that stage and delivered a set about going to the pet store that was so perfectly crafted, so brilliantly paced that Johnny Carson himself called her over to the couch afterward. Do you understand what that meant? Carson didn't invite just anyone to sit down. That gesture was his seal of approval. His way of telling the world, this person matters. Ellen's career exploded. She got her own sitcom in 1994 called Ellen for 3 seasons. It was a solid hit, funny, charming, safe. But Ellen was carrying a secret that was crushing her from the inside. She was gay. And in mid-90s America, that wasn't just personal information. It was career suicide. But here's where Ellen did something that still echoes through culture today. In 1997, she came out. Not quietly. Not through a magazine interview that could be brushed aside. She came out on the cover of Time magazine with the words, "Yep, I'm gay," blazing across the newsstand. And then her character came out on her sitcom in an episode that drew over 40 million viewers. 40 million people watched Ellen DeGeneres tell the truth about who she was. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Advertisers pulled out. Affiliates refused to air the episode. The show got canceled the next season. Ellen found herself essentially blacklisted from Hollywood. The woman who had been Johnny Carson's golden child was now toxic. It's untouchable for all the wrong reasons. For 3 years, Ellen couldn't get work. 3 years of silence. 3 years of wondering if telling the truth had cost her everything. But then came 2003. A producer named Jim Paratori had an idea. What if Ellen hosted a daytime talk show? What if that quick wit and that infectious energy and that pioneering courage could translate into something new? The Ellen DeGeneres Show. Premiered in September 2003, and it was like watching lightning catch in a bottle. Ellen danced. She gave away prizes. She surprised audience members with life-changing gifts. She brought on celebrities and made them feel comfortable in a way that other hosts couldn't quite manage. She played games that were silly and joyful and reminded people that television could still be fun. And most importantly, she made kindness her entire brand. Be kind to one another became her sign-off. Her mantra, the thing that separated her show from every other talk show cluttering the reshoot. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that glides on smoothly and leaves a receipt, like Sil lies, long last, Sil off. You is enough, my lies, my mom lies team, my light. Mia lies, my light, my mantra, my lies, tea, my munty, my messages, my miscoy. My lie it was go. By non me so wide, it is it but, to be my not all with a it is it. Daytime landscape America fell in love all over again. The awards started piling up. 30 Daytime Emmys, a Presidential Medal of Freedom, multi-million-dollar contracts. Ellen wasn't just successful, she was an empire. Her show was syndicated in countries around the world. She voiced Dory in Finding Nemo and became one of Pixar's most beloved characters. She married actress Portia de Rossi in a ceremony that felt like a fairy tale. From the outside, Ellen DeGeneres had won. She had overcome the hatred and the bigotry and built something beautiful on the other side. But inside the walls of that studio, something very different was happening. The cracks started showing in 2020. July 2020, to be specific. Right in the middle of the pandemic, when the world was already falling apart and people were stuck at home consuming content like oxygen. BuzzFeed News published an article. Current and former employees of the Ellen DeGeneres Show were speaking out. Not about Ellen directly at first, but about the toxic culture behind the scenes. They talked about being fired for taking medical leave, about being told not to speak to Ellen if they saw her in the hallways, about racism and intimidation and fear that permeated every corner of the production. One employee said it felt like working in a prison. Another described being penalized for attending a family funeral. The stories were brutal, detailed, consistent. And then came the follow-up. More employees, more stories. And this time, the accusations hit closer to Ellen herself. Former staff members said the Be Kind message was a facade, that Ellen could be cold, dismissive, cruel. That the warmth America saw on camera evaporated the second the cameras turned off. That employees were living in constant fear of doing something that might catch her attention in the wrong way. Twitter exploded. The hashtag was everywhere. Celebrities who had appeared on her show started sharing their own uncomfortable experiences. Former audience members talked about being yelled at. Comedians whispered about Elon's reputation in green rooms across Los Angeles. The whole thing unraveled so fast, it was dizzying. Warner Brothers launched an investigation. 3 top producers were fired. Ellen herself apologized in a letter to staff that felt simultaneously genuine and carefully crafted by a legal team. She went on air at the beginning of the next season and addressed the controversy directly. I learned that things happened here that never should have happened, she said, looking straight into the camera with those famous blue eyes that had sparkled with mischief for 17 years. I take that very seriously. And I want to say I am so sorry to the people who were affected. But here's the brutal truth. It didn't matter. The damage was done. The illusion was shattered. America had believed in Ellen DeGeneres as a person, not just as a performer. They had invested emotionally in her journey. They had celebrated her courage and defended her kindness and held her up as proof that good people could win in Hollywood, and now they felt betrayed. Ratings started dropping. Sponsors got nervous. The show that had once been untouchable was suddenly vulnerable. Ellen announced in 2021 that the 19th season would be the final season. She framed it as her choice, as the natural end of an incredible run, as moving on to new creative challenges. But everyone knew what it really was. a cancellation disguised as a retirement. The Ellen DeGeneres show ended in May 2022. The final episode featured Jennifer Aniston, who had been Ellen's first guest 19 years earlier. They hugged. They cried. Ellen danced one last time. She thanked her audience and her staff and everyone who had made the journey possible. And then she was gone. Now here's where the brutal rumor comes in. The thing that people in Hollywood won't say publicly but acknowledge privately with a kind of resigned certainty. Ellen isn't coming back. Not because she doesn't want to. Not because she's financially set for life, though she is. Not because she's pursuing other interests, though she's tried. She's not coming back because the industry won't have her. Because audiences won't forgive her. Because that thing she built her entire empire on, that message of kindness and authenticity, was revealed to be a lie. And in a culture that increasingly values authenticity above almost everything else. That's the one sin you can't come back from. You can recover from a bad movie. You can bounce back from a failed project. You can even survive a personal scandal if you handle it right. But you can't recover from being exposed as fundamentally different from who you claim to be. Ellen tried. She really did. After the show ended, she did a stand-up special. She framed it as a return to her roots, as getting back to what made her famous in the first place. The reviews were mixed at best. Audiences didn't show up in the numbers Netflix had hoped for. She's been spotted occasionally, living her life, spending time with Portia, staying out of the spotlight in a way that feels less like choice and more like necessity. And meanwhile, Hollywood has moved on. Daytime television has moved on. A new generation of hosts has filled the space Ellen once dominated. None of them dance quite like she did. None of them have quite captured that lightning she once held. But they're there. And Ellen isn't. The brutal rumor that everyone knows but nobody wants to say. Plainly is this. Ellen DeGeneres represented something that American culture desperately wanted to believe in. The idea that kindness wins. That being true to yourself leads to success and happiness. That the underdog can triumph and maintain their integrity. When that illusion collapsed, it didn't just damage Ellen's career. It damaged what she represented. And you can't resurrect that. You can't put that back together. You can't walk back into the cultural conversation and expect people to forget that the foundation was hollow. Some celebrities fall because of their actions. Ellen fell because of the gap between her image and her reality. And in the age of social media, in the era of radical transparency, in a moment when audiences demand authenticity as the price of admission, that gap is fatal. Could Ellen host another show? Technically, yes. Could she get a development deal? Probably. She's still Ellen DeGeneres. She still has connections and resources and decades of experience. But would audiences show up? Would advertisers feel comfortable? Would the cultural moment allow for her return without immediately relitigating everything that led to her departure? The answer, quietly acknowledged in every corner of the entertainment industry, is no. Ellen DeGeneres was one of the most successful television hosts in history. She broke barriers. She changed culture. She built an empire on the promise of joy and kindness. And then that empire crumbled because the foundation was never as solid as everyone believed. The brutal rumor isn't really a rumor at all. It's just the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Ellen's career isn't on pause. It's not taking a break. It's not waiting for the right opportunity. It's over, and sometimes, in Hollywood, in culture. In the complicated relationship between celebrities and the audiences who make them possible, over really means over. No comeback. No resurrection. No redemption arc that wraps everything up in a satisfying bow. Just the echo of what was, and the knowledge of what can never be again. That's the brutal truth about Ellen DeGeneres. Not that she was mean. Not that the workplace was toxic, but that she represented something beautiful and important and necessary to millions of people. And when that representation turned out to be false, there was no path back. Some doors once closed stay closed forever. If this story got you thinking, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what you think about celebrity comebacks and whether anyone truly deserves a second chance. We're diving deep into the untold stories that shaped pop culture, one brutal truth at a time.